Welcome to the Math Ed Podcast. My name is Sam Otten from the University of Missouri, and today I am joined by a scholar from Utrecht University in the Netherlands. It's Sigal Rotem, who's an assistant professor at the Freudenthal Institute. Sigal, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to be talking about her article that was recently published in Educational Studies in Mathematics, and the article's titled Using Critical Incidents as a Tool for Promoting Prospective Teachers Noticing During Reflective Discussions in a Fieldwork-Based University Course. And Sigal, I know this article kind of comes out of some work that you've been doing for a while and a team that you've been working on with your dissertation. So I want to go ahead and start with your grad studies. Where did you do your graduate studies, your doctoral studies, and maybe you can just briefly give us a hint of what your dissertation was about.
Actually, my dissertation was in a way connected, I think, to this work. So it's a good starting point, I think. My graduate studies were in the Weizmann Institute with Roni Karasenti and Avram Arkabi. Since then, I started working around teacher education and pre-service teachers. And then I did my doctoral studies in the University of Haifa in Israel. My supervisors were Dr. Michael Ayalon and Professor Rosa Laking, which I was inspired by them both. And I started working there around pre-service teachers' professional development, also using critical events. We call them critical events, but they're similar. The idea is similar to critical incidents, kind of seeing how they develop their teacher noticing during field work activities. So it was similar, but also very different. In the doctoral studies, I was looking at their own reflection around this critical events, while in like their own personal reflection and their own noticing, where I examined written reports where in this work and the article that we're now discussing, it was more about the university discussions that occurred. So you probably see the connection here, like similar frameworks,
Hmm.
but also the differences that this setting examining more of their individual noticing in here and in this paper that we're now discussing more of the collective noticing, I would say, in a way, not really, but in a way.
Yeah, collective noticing, or at least it's the students were noticing things and then bringing them together and discussing them and interpreting them collectively. So that brings in a collective aspect to it.
Yes, kind of trying to see how that forms in a social setting.
Right.
Yes. So, and also, I might say the setting was similar in the way that the pre-service teachers had some university, there was like a university course and field work activities. They were alternating between going 1 week to the school for the practice, like for the fieldwork activities, and then 1 week they went to the university lessons, and the university was kind of trying to bring the classroom into the university discussions. So in that way, it was similar.
Hmm. Right. So that's great to hear and think about that continuity from your graduate studies to this article. I want to give you a chance to say a little bit more about critical incidents, just to make sure that the listeners can have an understanding of what you mean by that term. Obviously, you've been working on it, thinking about it for quite a while. So help us understand critical incidents a little bit more, and then maybe let us know what motivated you to really think of critical incidents as an important element for working with prospective teachers or to help prospective teachers in their growth in some way.
Yes, okay. So critical incidents or critical events or moments where the students' mathematical thinking become apparent in some way. So it could be by their statements or by their action, or like something that hint the teacher that there is a mathematical thinking in what they're doing or saying. And this could provide the teacher with opportunity to go deeper into the mathematics that is discussed in the lesson. And that's like a working definition that I started with. But I think the idea is really there when teachers are meeting after class and kind of want to discuss what happened. They cannot start describing the entire lesson, right? So they need to pick something. And usually what they pick would be, well, when I relate to students learning and teaching to the mathematics, usually what they will pick was something that is was critical in a sense, critical for the lesson, critical for them. It seems to them something that worth mentioning, to sharing with their peers. And for me, this is what really critical incidents are about, a way to bring classroom moments into further discussion and reflection with teachers, with peers. I find it as a very productive way to frame something that happened and to talk about it. Really focus the reflection and the discussion into something particular that happened with a student in mathematics. We know by the literature that just asking teachers to discuss what happened in the lesson could lead to very general things and very general statements. So I find this tool as a way, as a construct to kind of narrow down what we are discussing now and allowing to dig deeper into the student thinking. And before starting my research, so even before starting graduate school or doctoral studies, I've been a teacher and I had a sense that something happened. Like I didn't have the language to discuss it or to construct to, oh, listen, this was a critical incident that happened just now. But I had the sense as a teacher, and I guess many teachers, when they teach, they have this that, oh, this is precious, this is gold, this is something I can work with now.
Hmm.
So the construct of critical events or critical incident really try to bring the language to discuss it
Hmm.
further on in teacher education programs.
And the way that you're talking about the specificity and how it really brings out some of the mathematical dynamics reminds me of also like questioning one person, or if you're questioning a student, that getting specific can really lead to a lot more fruitful things rather than like general, how are you doing? Or how is it going? But getting more specific and being like, tell me about that negative sign right there, or tell me about something specific that they did. The specificity actually helps a lot more to come out from it, it seems like. And now to me, this seems like a way of doing that with a whole class of prospective teachers. Like it's a way for all of us to kind of get specific, and now we can really bring a lot of fruitful discussion and interpretation and things out from it. So, yeah, to me, this is also kind of exciting to think about it as a tool for teacher education, but also as a site to do research on this. You mentioned the context is this university course for prospective mathematics teachers. There were 22 of them in the course, and you said that it alternates between going in the field and then coming to the university-based course and then kind of, of course, discussing and connecting and unpacking things from between. Is there anything else you want to add about the context in which this study took place?
So in this study, it was done as I think I mentioned it before. It was done as part of my postdoc fellowship in Athens, in Greece, and with Despina Potari and Yorgos Psycharis, which I really enjoyed working with. And over there, to become a secondary mathematics teacher, you need to do a master program. So it's not like some places have a teaching certificate. They don't have it. They just do a master program in the university and they have one course. So this is like the method course. That's the only course where they have field work activities. So I think that also bring kind of context in terms of the necessity of this course to bring the theory and practice together because that's the only chance to wait to see how an experience, how theories that are learned in the university are translated into teaching practice and student learning. And we also know that this is a very difficult thing to do to kind of support pre-service teachers to see how theory is translated into practice. So this alternation between fieldwork activities and the university discussions are really meant to bring that together. So yes, and also a part of the community. So there are 22 pre-service teachers, but there are also the mentors which were graduate students. So they already did the program and they are coming back to the university to serve as mentors for the students. And they also take part in this community of learning to become teachers. So they're bringing kind of their own perspective of having more experience in the classrooms and support the pre-service teachers' reflection about their critical incidents and about their teaching.
Yeah, it's great to have that group together.
Mhm.
So let's go into a bit of the findings from the study in Ed Studies in Mathematics. So you have three research questions. The first one is about basically about the prospective teachers noticing around these critical incidents or what they notice with the critical incidents. And then you also extend that into how do they discuss it and how do those discussions go when they're talking to peers and that whole group that you were describing. And then your third research question is about the teacher educator's role. We'll hold that off for a second. But let's start with the noticings from the prospective teachers and then how did they discuss the critical incidents? Tell us a little bit about what you found there.
We started by working with the Vanes framework for learning to notice from 2011. And in her work, she has levels of noticing. There are four levels. And we kind of refined this and we tried to look at I would say like the essence of every level. So we had a descriptive, evaluative, interpretive kind of stand. That the third interpretive, the fourth one was alternate explanation, and the fifth were questioning. And those could be like different stands that the prospective teachers take when they discuss the critical event. And what we found was most of their turns in the discussions were either descriptive, so kind of giving more details of what happened in the critical event, or interpretive. So interpretive would be really starting to get some sort of start reasoning about why the students trying to explain what happened. Oh, they did this and this because they were trying to get, I don't know, let's say in the example that is in the paper, the student, they had two figures. They need to decide which figure is bigger. And the first thing that the student did was kind of measuring all around the perimeter of the figure and going by this. So an interpretive stand would be saying, oh, the student measured everything around because the instruction was very open. And so they had to figure out in terms of one figure is bigger than the other. So kind of trying to start thinking why the students were doing what they were doing, and that would be interpretive. Alternate explanation would be kind of suggesting a different idea, or a questioning would be also putting some question marks in their interpretation. So I think what is interesting here is that, okay, we have these levels, and we saw that most pre-service teachers use descriptive or interpretive, but what does it tells us? And then the interesting part is to see how this progress through the discussion. What was interesting to me to figure out, to see that the descriptive talk was necessary in several parts of the discussion. So, and I say necessary because, well, the pre-service teacher who was talking was giving more context, was doing more description, and it was not just in the beginning of the talk. So they did. I think it's very reasonable when we start talking about something. I first give you context, but then the context always came like even in the middle of the discussion. So they were kind of discussing something, and then they moved to a different stand, like taking more interpretive stand or alternate explanation. And then they needed more descriptive in order to keep the discussion going. And I think this is a very, well, for my perspective, it's a very interesting result. And we also looked at how they connect and link different aspects of learning and teaching to their interpretation. So the example I just used before, that the student measured the perimeter because the question was very, very open, is actually doing the interpretation by connecting the students. Well, here it was like student doing with the task and with the teaching instructions. So this kind of connection is what we want the pre-service teachers to think about, right? To connect the different aspect of learning and teaching mathematics. So that's also something that we looked on. And we also looked at what do they base their interpretation on? Because as I mentioned before, we really wanted the pre-service teachers to connect what they are doing in the field to what they are learning in the university. So we wanted to see whether they're kind of bringing this information, like experience in different places to kind of back their interpretation. So, oh, I think this type of basis would be like, I think that they measured the perimeter because of the instruction, because I read in this, or something like that. That would be kind of grounding their interpretation. We also had, so with this kind of grounding, we had one of the categories we were using was research-based interpretation. We didn't get that much, actually. So
Yeah.
I think this was, I don't know if it was surprising because it's been mentioning in the literature that it's really difficult for pre-service teachers to do this.
Hmm.
We were hoping that this kind of setting, and I still believe that this kind of setting can allow to do this. I think it's really needs to be more explicit. This could be a different question, but I think this could be one of the, for at least from my perspective, this is one of the come out or takeaways from this research that we need to be more explicit in how we connect theory with practice, because it seems like just having this setting and having this critical events or having the field experience coming into the university for discussion is not completely enough.
A lot of things were coming out of the discussion. So the students are realizing they need to give more detail, or it's making them think of more things about the context. And so that's really nice when the discussion and the interpretation sort of prompts them to actually dig more into the context, share more about the context. They're sharing more about the curriculum, some instruction things that were happening. So that's good. I also noticed in the article that the prospective teachers would sometimes bring up things from their own experience when they were a math student.
Mhm.
So they're conjuring up memories and they're connecting memories of themselves as learners to like what they're seeing in the critical incidents. So lots of good stuff is coming out. And then at the end here, you were talking about, but the research connections or the theoretical connections are maybe the hard ones to bring in.
Mhm.
But I don't think that that takes away from the good stuff that was coming out of those conversations. And I know those of us, in the research space, we always kind of hope for these research connections and theoretical connections to happen, but maybe that's just something that's down the line, or maybe it's something that we care about more and it's not quite on the radar yet of the prospective teachers. Or maybe that's our role as teacher educators is that we make those connections and sort of share some of that. And it might not organically come from the students. Maybe that is where the teacher educator comes in. And that might lead us to the other research question you had, which is about the role of the teacher educator. So maybe you just want to say a little bit more about that.
For the teacher educator, we used a framework also written by Vanessa and colleagues from 2014. This framework is about facilitating discussions around video clips to promote teachers noticing. And we kind of we did some changes there because, as I mentioned, it's around video clips, and we had the critical events where the pre-service teachers brought were written. So it was like a different format. And the pre-service teachers, they actually had some sort of script that they used, but also a PowerPoint that they prepared as to initiate the discussion around their event. So we need to shift to change to do some changes for the framework. I think it's a very productive framework in the sense that it kind of bring all the different part roles that the teacher educator have in those discussions. So starting from the beginning of the discussion and also kind of promoting further discussions and interaction within the when we're like kind of in already in the middle of it. So I really like I really think that this framework is very productive. And what we saw that the teacher educator also did a lot of contextualizing. So I think this takes us back a bit to the descriptive part. In a way, when the pre-service teacher who was bringing their own critical events did not give enough context for the participant to do their interpretation, it seems like it was a teacher educator role giving more context or like saying, yes, this is a very typical task for the seventh grade, or asking how many students. So the scriptive talk, which I said was, I think it's very important for discussions such that we can see it in like two places. First, by the descriptive talk of the participants, and second, by the teacher educator move of contextualizing. And then the teacher educator also had a role in pushing the discussion forward. So after, in a way, so after they had enough context, he was pushing for interpretation and also getting more participants involved in the discussion. And even in the example, we see at some point that the teacher educator kind of redraw a bit. So it's kind of going backward a bit. No, not physically, but in the discussion. So we see more participants sharing, either bringing more context or asking for more context, but also bringing their own interpretation in different forms. So also having different explanations to what happened there and putting some more question mark about what the students were doing. And we see that as a conversation progresses. And I think this is really captures, in a way, the teacher educator role, right? Knowing where more context is needed in order to have the discussion going, knowing when to go a bit to the back and get other participants into discussion, knowing when to push participants to share further interpretations. And yes, I think this is a kind of their own teaching practices.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are great things.
Yeah, for example, I know that some teacher educators, so this is one approach, and it's also mentioned in the article. So Cole's approach, also influenced by Mason's work, that there is a need to do some reconstruction in the beginning. So before we start talking about something with the teachers, we need to reconstruct the event that we're talking about. And we know that in each event, there are so many details. Like if we sit in a classroom right now in mathematics classroom, we see so many details. It's really difficult, I think, for one person to capture everything. And so this kind of reconstruction phase is very important to get the conversation before moving into interpretation. But I think what this article shows, this work shows, is that it doesn't necessarily needs to be two different parts. We don't need to go starting with the reconstruction part, really getting all the different details, and then moving into interpretation. We can also do it like in a more cycle, yeah, like in a cycle manner, right? So we start by getting enough description and context to start, and then we can go a little bit to the interpretation, get some of the interpretation, and then go back to the descriptive part again when needed. And that's part of the teacher educator role, to know when to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the art of it for sure. Really appreciate you talking about that article, and listeners can find more by going to Educational Studies in Mathematics and finding that and seeing those frameworks in detail and the frameworks in action. Just quickly, I wonder if you have next steps or where you're going to take your thoughts about these critical incidents into the future.
Well, I think the teacher educator role is super important, and it's need to be really unpacked a bit more, like when to know in order to support teacher educators, like when do they do the shift between the descriptive and the interpretive part? How do I know that this is a time to go further into interpretation? I'm really interested in the discussions that occur in the university, and this is part of the work that I want to continue doing. So, and we also know that it's not like promoting teacher noticing and paying attention to students' work and statement in a way that the teacher can build on, can be done using various artifacts or representations. So we have the written form of critical event, but we can also find video clips that shows critical events. We can also have it with cartoons, and we can also ask teachers to write this on their own. So I'm also interested about this idea of, having different representations of the critical events, and what can we get as teacher educator from each representation and how we can combine them. And so really about the art of teaching teachers. And I also use, so this is one line of the work that I do. And a different line of work is around how we can use critical events to support pre-service teachers to learn different and new ways of teaching, how to incorporate, for example, socio-ecological issues into the mathematics classrooms, and using critical events as a way to discuss their new ideas and new approaches about teaching and learning mathematics. So these are kind of the two things that I'm
Yeah.
trying to unpack now.
Yeah, excellent. For my final question, though, I want to ask, what if you weren't doing that at all? What if you weren't in math education? Is there anything you could imagine doing as an alternative career?
So my first response to this, well, I would be a math teacher, but then that's mathematic education, right?
Yeah, I'm not going to
So
allow that to be your actual answer.
yeah, that's still mathematic education. Yes. So I need to find something else. Well, before I was a math teacher, well, I started as a math teacher, then I got into the research. But before that, I was an engineer and I have a first master. So I have two masters. One of them is in environmental engineering. And I think I would do something like, I think I would have developed my career in researching environmental issues and sustainability. And this is what recent calls are about, having more ecological, environmental issues in math education. I think this is why I find this very appealing and trying to kind of push this forward through math education and use the critical events as a tool to support teachers to think about it, showing them that it's really about the mathematics, but also about other issues.
Yeah, I think that definitely seems like some connections that can be made and definitely important ones to consider thinking more broadly about the environment and the planet and our sustainability and things. So that's definitely, I think, something hopefully you can connect as you keep working. So,
Yeah.
Sigal, it's been great talking to you. Thanks so much for doing this work and for taking the time to share it with us.
Thank you so much.